In this episode, I'll be giving my review and reaction to the sort of brand new movie, Project Hail Mary, released in 2026, just a couple weeks ago. Let's get it right into Project Hail Mary. I had somewhat high expectations for Project Hail Mary heading into the theater. This was the last book I picked up before the end of my summer reading, and I don't read past the summer because I only read on the beach. However, I wish I did read this book because this was an awesome, awesome movie, and I'm so excited that I got to go see it in theaters. Now, unfortunately, I'll never go read the book because I only read the book, then watch the movie. I don't watch the movie, then go read the book because the book is always better. And I don't know, I feel like it would be weird to go and get more detail and more into the story. And although there were a lot of people outside of my theater talking about the book and some differences in the book, so I'm curious to hear thoughts down below if anyone has any on what were the key differences. I was meaning to look it up, but I just didn't do that. So back to the movie. Insane. This movie was awesome. I think this is probably the best movie I've seen in the past 4 years at least. Like I'm thinking of Batman. That was 2022. This was really good, and I went with my dad. And my dad, my parents don't really like going to the movie theaters, at least as of late. But now I think they're fully back in, and my dad was excited about this movie, which is pretty surprising because he doesn't like long movies. 2 hours 36 minutes on the runtime, but you don't miss a second on this thing. This is really pound for pound, bar for bar, easily the best movie I've seen in 2026. Granted, I've only seen 3 movies in 2026, but I'm willing to say this is on my Mount Rushmore movies that have come out in the 2020s. This reminds me a lot of two of my favorite movies, Interstellar and Arrival. Kind of a mix between both of those movies, which just makes it purely insane from that point of view. I can't recommend this movie enough, and I'm glad I bought into the hype train. We gotta get to the movies. I'm trying to get to 12, maybe this year, 12 movies in theaters, maybe more. But Ryan Gosling, perfect casting for this role. Really, the movie is just his kind of masterpiece. I think this will be remembered as his best movie of all time. Granted, I haven't seen La La Land. I know that's a high one up there, and Drive is on my list as well. I'm not sure if I'm gonna watch La La Land. Doesn't really seem like it'd be something that I'm into, but who knows? Can't say enough positive about this movie, man. I'm really super glad I got to see this in theaters, and I might go back. There's only been a select few movies that I've gone to see a couple times. Well, actually, I'm now remembering Oppenheimer, but this movie's probably better than Oppenheimer. I hate to say it. Well, it's fine to say. I'm a Nolan defender, but you have to be real. I think I saw Batman twice, Oppenheimer twice. I need to go see Project Hail Mary twice. It was a breathtaking, awesome adventure. You feel like you're in this adventure. There isn't a dull moment in the movie. Although my friend is not a big fan of a certain scene that maybe we can get into once we get past the non-spoiler section, which is just me rambling for the first 2 minutes of video. Anyways, I love this movie, Project Hail Mary. Definitely one of my favorite movies. Probably top 20-ish so far. I think I need to rewatch it to really get a good gauge of where it lands in an all-time pantheon. But really well done. We're still making great movies in 2026, okay? And I know there are some doubters out there. The movies kind of came back in 2023 with the whole Barbenheimer thing, but we're officially back, and we're not going anywhere with Project Hail Mary. This was a great, great movie. So let's get into my thoughts and reactions throughout the movie. We have our main character, and there's sort of two storylines going on throughout this movie. One where Grace, the scientist, is finding himself in this ship, and also his backstory and why he ended up on this ship. So we started this movie off with him waking up from a coma, and this is the character played by Ryan Gosling. He wakes up from a coma, finds himself to be the only one still alive on his spaceship, which is kind of a weird thing to wake up to. You pull these people out of their little crypto chamber, not crypto, cryo chambers or whatever, and they're supposed to be on an induced coma, but something went wrong with them too that you're the only one still alive. Which I would be terrified to go into a medically induced coma for years and wake up in the middle of space. Like that just is not something I'm ever going to do. I'm scared to even go into space. I don't want to go out there. It's scary. And I just watched a TikTok the other day. It was like you're worrying about your homework and you realize there's like we're not even like a pebble on the spectrum of we're not even like a piece of sand in the spectrum of the universe. Yeah, and there's nobody else out there. I don't like talking about this. Maybe this is a topic for a off the deep end with Dub segment, but I don't know, man. This is not a good start. I would be freaking out, and he doesn't even freak out that much. He's trying to just figure out who he is, because I guess if you're in a medically induced coma for that long, you don't even remember who you are, where you are, and what's going on. So pretty funny to see him kind of fumble around. And Ryan Gosling, as I mentioned previously, is just great in this character. He's pretty affable throughout the movie, so it's pretty funny content to see him kind of fumble around, do a couple things, and like he makes like one-liners to himself, which obviously he has to talk to himself because we're people in 2026. We need dialogue. No, actually, I did like that part though, and he's kind of just this like quirky character. So it's cool to see that develop really fast, and you're on his side right away because he's funny, but almost in like a cringe way, but it's not actually cringe, So I did like that part, but it's also sad because he's by himself in the middle of space, has no idea where he's going. All he has is this robotic voice to talk to him, which at least he has that, or else he probably would drive himself crazy. But it's kind of almost this dual sense that goes on throughout the movie of, it's very real, but at the same time, it's kind of just goofy, and it's like, oh, fucking, I'm in this situation. It's a Hail Mary, as the movie is properly titled. So I did like the introduction to this movie. One thing I did not expect as we go into his backstory is that he was a middle school teacher, where I guess this is kind of, I draw a lot of parallels from this movie to Arrival. And in Arrival, I guess she's like a professor, so I guess these teachers are ending up being the ones who save the world. So make sure you're nice to your teacher. However, he's just a middle school teacher with these kids, and I didn't know this book came out in 2021 or 2022. I thought this was like an older book. I don't know, I didn't realize that like books were still good in 20, like I feel like nobody talks about books that have come out recently, but this was a good one that came out only a couple of years ago, and we're already turning this into a movie after coming out in 2022 in print. That's crazy. Anyways, he's a middle school teacher, which is sort of outrageous for him to be the one that ends up on the spaceship, but we learn why it's him. It's because he wrote this paper about saying basically like screw what everyone's trying to tell you. I'm telling the truth. And yeah, I I think it's still a little bit outrageous that he's like all of a sudden the government just shows up at his door and is like, you're coming with us to do this. But there is at least enough of a logical connection there to be like, let's go, So I'm down for that. I don't care. And he is like he's very very smart. You can tell that throughout the movie. So over from like a logistical standpoint, is this the one person you choose to come and save the world with you? Probably not, but once you like sort of see the development, it's an understandable choice. There's only really three main characters in this movie, one of them being Sandra Hüller. Her character is kind of this like standoffish government agent who just is trying to like fix the world and doesn't care what's gonna get in her way of doing it. So I really liked her character here, of like their dynamic, her and Ryan Gosling's character, Grace. And he's like a tough sell at first. He doesn't want to go, but then she's like, "You have to come," basically. And what the question I asked is, what are they going to do if he said no? You're just going to go find another teacher because he's the one who's written a paper about this type of stuff or his certain ideas. So interesting stuff there to start off the movie, and we kind of get that background. And I do like how the two timelines play within each other. Of They kind of relate. It's like he's waking up, and then we learn like how did this even start. So it's kind of like both beginnings, and the timelines play out at the same pace and the same sort of stuff. So I did enjoy both of the timelines very much, and it actually his background story adds a lot of context to his character that we don't even need to, or we do need to see, but it makes it that much more enriching. So great stuff early on in the movie, and we get the whole premise of what's going on here. So something called astrophage, which science was my worst subject in school. I was never good at science, just couldn't really crack the code. I was more of a math or social studies type of person. However, now here I am a couple years later, and science fiction movies are my favorite movies. So maybe I should have been paying more attention to science class or trying to figure it out. But astrophage is apparently this like microscopic bacteria, essentially. I don't want to say too much or in case I'm wrong, but it's eating the sun. So I thought this was a really interesting idea for how like this is something that would change the premise of different like space types of movies. Like I've never seen anything like this, like a little bacteria just slowly eating away at the sun, the surface of the sun. So when that happens, basically everything just goes bad. If there's no sun, we lose energy, we lose light, everything goes dark, and countries just start going crazy. Which I'm watching the show Paradise right now, and if you've watched that show, you can see how quickly that can go into deterioration when there's an essential resource lacking. I did like this interesting kind of concept of astrophaging the sun. Never thought that to be a possibility ever. I never even thought that that would be something that could possibly, I don't know, happen. And maybe is this a sign we have to look out? Maybe the sun's in trouble. That's something you got to be worried about. I guess I didn't even think of that. So, and I don't know if astrophage is a real thing. again, I'm not a qualified scientist, so I don't know what's going on in this capacity of the world. That's sort of the basis of why we're going on this mission, which makes sense. It's a very valuable mission, which is why I keep saying the stakes of this movie are real. Because if you think about this type of stuff long term, and if you know how people just are in general, you know that this, even if everyone banded together, no one would actually, because there's always people who are, this isn't real and blah 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 blah. So very real stakes for why this mission needs to be undertook. And their mission is to go to the one star that hasn't been dimmed. So I guess, you know, the sun is a star. I know, at least know that from science class. But there's one star that has not been dimmed by the astrophage, and astrophage has kind of just infiltrated the universe like a invasive species, or at least our universe and all the stars. But there is one star super far out there, light years away, that has not been dimmed by the astrophage. So that's the mission, to try and unlock what's going on with that star. Why is that one star protected from this astrophage light eating material? And can we encapsulate that and bring it back? It's kind of the only chance we have, because they're, you know, when it comes to space stuff, you're screwed, because did we even go to the moon? I know there's like a big, actually, it's kind of interesting that this movie's going out now, and there's this big space mission going out. I haven't read much about it. I don't read much of the news these days, but interesting to see this movie come out and pop culture references with Artemis 2, I believe it's called. But we didn't really go much into space, and some question if we ever even did go into space. So to be able to go on this mission and be the one to go all the way out there and ship or travel and whatever, it's even that much more of a feat, which, you know, I think I've given you the full picture of why this is really, really a dangerous trip. One caveat to this mission, they're going to use this astrophage as the fuel for the engine, which, once again, right over my head, the science stuff. That's another thing. You don't even need to care about science. Like, do you like Interstellar because of the inner workings of the science in that movie? As we get more and more into Grace's backstory, it doesn't seem like he's even going. He's just kind of this like out of the ordinary scientist who's kind of thrown into these big official meetings, and he's kind of just a goofball in them, which just plays into the sort of comedy aspect of the movie. That is an undertone for sure, but it's not a main focus. But he's kind of just in these like superficial meetings, and just like always has to turn to Sandra Hüller's character and be like, "What's going on?" And then she's able to kind of be the bridge, which is just another great layer to their dynamic. But yeah, so far it doesn't seem like he's even going to be possibly going on this trip. We know he goes on this trip, so it's like, how does he get there? Interesting way how that happens. So as he's moving, he finally gets acclimated with the ship, and he is going to make it to the star. And he kind of knows what's going on. He knows the mission. He's just like kind of accepting a little bit of what's going on. He sees an alien spacecraft outside of his spacecraft, and this thing is crazy. Xenon. Apparently, it's made of xenon or xenon. I don't know. I'm gonna get butchered by the scientist. I think it's xenon. It's made of xenon, and it's really cool. And that's another great thing that I haven't even talked about so far. The graphics, the CGI in this thing. Mint, dude, this is perfect. This was crazy work by the CGI artists and whatever. I don't know the proper term for it, but the background stuff, the scenics of the movie, as I like to say, it's awesome. And it's crazy. There's just another being out there, and brings up the age-old question of, do you believe there's something else out there? Which, if you saw the graphic I saw on TikTok that I mentioned, you would believe there's something else out there. However, at this point, you're just so invested. You're like, who is this person, and are they going to be able to communicate? What's going on with this other species in this crazy thing right next to you? This xenon thing that's it sends little like a tube over to Grace's ship, and he can't figure out how to get it. And then it's like Lefty Lucy is actually the reverse on this place, which I don't know if that was like actually a thing. I don't know if everything was in reverse, whatever. We finally get to the big reveal, at least of the first sort of third or second, or probably first third of the movie, which was revealed in trailers. That I don't know if this was supposed to be a big part of like a big reveal. This character, Rocky, he's made of rocks, essentially. Xenon. Xenon. It's going to kill me. Xenon. I'm sorry, either way. He's made of xenon, but this is a very cool, interesting, intelligent being where it kind of just like wobbles around on its rocks. And I'm, just, I'm glad that they figured out the communication barrier pretty fast. And there's a good chance this thing could have just been hostile, and it'd be over for Grace, because we know humans, you know, We're not the most structurally integral or integrated thing. We're not this. We're not. Invincible. We're very susceptible to many things, and we have a lot of weak spots. So imagine, we got sent on this trip, and then this thing's trying to kill you when you get to the star, and that's just it for the human universe. That's crazy to think about. Very lucky in the Project Hail Mary universe that Rocky was here and was cool and willing to communicate, because the alternative, we don't even need to say it. Rocky and Grace quickly find a way to communicate. I'm glad that, for the movie's sake and for the understanding of through the movie, appreciate, first of all, they had Grace talking out loud to himself, which led to good context to the movie. I think that's essential when it's just one character mainly. And I'm also glad they were able to give Rocky a sort of robotic voice to talk through. That makes it easier to just get right on with it, rather than like, we have the initial stage of them like trading, drawing and stuff and doing motions, but for them to actually be able to talk helps a lot through the back half of this movie. So I liked that they kind of just got that out of the way pretty fast. And these scenes are very endearing, by the way, of when they're actually first meeting and whatever. And like I said, lucky that they're friendly. Rocky we learned a little bit about Rocky. So Rocky was actually sent on a similar trip like Grace, but his species is a lot different. They're beings that live for like thousands of years, and Rocky's the only one who made it to the ship as well. So both Grace and Rocky are lone survivors in a sense, been probably in space for a really long time. So for them to be able to meet just makes it that much more endearing and cute. So we learn, there's nothing actually in regards to Grace's family. He's kind of just like a lone wolf in the world, and we get a icy line about that later from Sandra Hüller's character. But Rocky does have somebody. Rocky at one point is just all over Grace, and Grace doesn't know how to deal with it because, like, I'm assuming in Rocky's world, they're all just like these. Well, we don't have to assume because we know later on, but they're all these like jumpy, rocky creatures that just don't know social boundaries. And Grace, for some guy who's been in a coma for years and has been on a ship by himself for a while, you'd think he'd enjoy the company. They work together and figure out how they're going to be able to get a solution to get rid of this astrophage on their suns and stars. Obviously, Rocky's universe has the same issue going on. They figure that out together too, and they're going to discover what's keeping the star alive is these sort of materials or bacteria that they have on their planet that are eating the astrophage and becoming an invasive species to the astrophage. The astrophage are not doing anything because these species on this planet are taking them out. Now they're going to do a sort of scoop plan where they're just going to scoop some material off this planet and bring it back to both their planets. This was a big part of the movie. I thought this was going to be the climax, this big mission where Grace is on the little rope that comes out of a spaceship and you're like free walking and he has to grab it. And not only that, the fuel starts leaking and the ship goes into an uncontrollable spin. It's going really bad. Rocky's trying to figure out how to handle it, but Rocky's in a bubble because he can't breathe in oxygen, and Grace can't breathe in what Rocky breathes in. It's this very emotional, very sad scene where I thought Rocky was cooked, where Rocky makes a sacrifice play, breaks his bubble, where now he can't breathe and can't function in this space. And I really thought that they were going to kill him on us, and I was like, we can't have this man. I'm almost getting sad now just thinking about this. But it was so sad of a scene. Good job, Rocky, sacrificing, and I really thought he was dead, which was just, his universe is screwed. And in the meantime of the sequences I just explained happening, Rocky had actually said, I'll give you some astrophage so you can go back to your planet. So initially, Grace thought he was going to die. And then he got a glimmer of hope from Rocky that, I'm going to go back home, which he never even thought was possible. And then he's sacrificing himself so they both couldn't make it. Now only Grace can make it. So super sad stuff right there. But albeit we're good because I'm not Grace, Rocky is still alive, and him coming back on screen, it was like that almost made me want to cheer in the theater. I'm not a very vocal theater watcher, but I was hyped to see that. So super glad to see Rocky back in play and still alive, and they're gonna figure this thing out. At least, this is like the second big climax now. So Rocky's still alive. We did it. they're gonna say goodbye. Pretty sad, felt pretty shallow of a goodbye. I guess I don't know how much you can really say when they spent a bunch of time in space together, but ultimately they were never gonna be able to live together on the same planet, or so you think. Pretty sad where they're both gonna go back to their own planets and just never see each other again or never talk to each other again after sharing this very special moment in space, basically saving both their societies, both their universes. Um, but it was very emotional here as well, where they're doing their little signals back and forth, which this is a big part of the lore to Project Hail Mary, where we finally get the conclusion to Grace's initial storyline, where we've been getting slow build-ups, seeing what was happening. Turns out the initial scientists that were supposed to go on the Project Hail Mary were blown up in a reversal sort of thing, and Grace was forced into go on the Project Hail Mary, so he didn't even want to go by himself. But Sandra Hüller's character was like, "Yo, you have no family, you have nothing here. You're going." And he's first she tries to let him she tries to bait him to be willing to go by himself, and then he's like, "I'm not doing this, sorry," which is ultimately a huge role reversal by the end of the movie when he makes the sacrifice play because Grace realizes that through this new solution they've made, it will eat away at the engine, eat away at the astrophage, and destroy Rocky's ship because his ship's running on basically pure xenon astrophage. There's a whole science to it. But Grace now being able to go home by himself and not even realizing, or being able to go home by himself, which he didn't even realize was a possibility now, makes the sacrifice play to go back and save Rocky and saves his ships, or save his ship. And he does send the probes back to Earth, so he basically risks his own life because seemingly he won't be able to live on Rocky's planet. And no, he sends those things back to Earth. That's it. He made the sacrifice play after Rocky made the sacrifice play for him. So very emotional lead up of these two both being sacrifice plays for each other at the end. And you know, will he ever make it back to Earth? We got a pretty good ending here with our cute ending, as I described it, with Grace living on Rocky's planet, and they kind of built this whole little world for him, this little bubble where he can exist in their planet, and he still talks to Rocky every day. Rocky wakes him up, and Grace walks a couple meters and goes to talk to his kids because he's now teaching a class of little Rockies, which is so awesome. And yeah, just a great ending to this movie, and really one of my favorite movies of all time. I'm giving this movie a 9.4, charged with emotion, almost cried, just kept me locked in every second of this movie. Great science fiction movie. I think it's going to be regarded as one of the all-time ones in a couple of years. So really high regards for me on this movie. 9.4 for Project Hail Mary. So where does this movie relate to the other movies we've reviewed so far on the Dubcast? It's beat out Blade Runner 2049, which I gave a 7.9. Just movies that are genred science fiction. No extra stuff on that. Just purely science fiction. This beats out Predator Badlands, which was a 7.5, and Blade Runner, which was a 6.7. So one of the all-time ones. It's gonna be hard to beat in the movie reviews going forward, but yeah, I don't regret this review for a second. And I watched this movie, I think a week ago at this point. Still holds up. Still think about this movie on a day-to-day basis. So Project Hail Mary, go see it if you still can. Coming up in the Debcast, this will be coming out on the 17th. So we just did NBA live stream on Monday for the first round of playoffs brackets, and then Daredevil and Survivor. I'm covering weekly. Daredevil Born Again season 2. Movie reviews coming up. Stay tuned for that. And then yeah, just the same old stuff happening. Movie reviews, TV shows, as I see fit, what I like to talk about. I'll be here. So make sure to subscribe. And yeah, social media stuff. The shorts have been popping. Okay, I'm doing a lot of short videos now. We're working up the social media, uh, what's it called? Resume of the Dubcast. We're moving. So stay tuned for Instagram, TikTok, YouTube Shorts. We're all over those things because you brain rotted kids don't want to watch my 30-minute reviews. No, I'm just kidding. Appreciate anyone who stayed this long and watched this movie review. All right, that's where we'll leave you with this one. And as always, be easy, y'all.